Hey, Irenicast listeners, before we get started with the show this week, I want to remind everyone that if you're listening to this episode on release day, February 1st, 2022, our next Intersections cohort is starting this coming Thursday, and it is still not too late to sign up. We close every episode of the show by saying thanks for joining the conversation. And we hope that is what you're doing with trusted friends and our family. But we also understand that for many of you, there's no one to speak to. Deconstruction can be a lonely process. Intersections is an opportunity to speak with other people who have experienced pain and heartache of being in fundamentalist communities. These weekly conversations are going to be facilitated by your hosts here at Irenicast, and our winter cohort is happening this Thursday through March 10th, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via Zoom. So you can still register. There's still some space available. There's information in the show notes at irenicast.com/195. That's irenicast.com/195. And there you'll find a link to sign up. So we hope to see you there. Without any further ado, let's move on to today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are Irenicast, a group of folks leaning into our progressive Christian imagination. I'm Casey.
This is Rajeev.
And I'm Jeff.
On the first and third Tuesday of every month,
we provoke conversation for shifting perspectives on theology and culture.
Thank you for joining us this week. As we are here together, Bonnie is on assignment, and so it is just the three boys hanging out. So we are going to be having a conversation in reflection to a wonderful conversation that Bonnie had with Carolyn Baker, who was just phenomenal. I mean, I am so excited to pick up her book. I'll tell you, damn, I was actually on the road as I was listening to the episode. And there were so many things that really hit me, especially as I was driving through Northern California, through wine country. And any of you who know any history about Northern California, there are some pockets of strong conservatism, and seeing those big signs about Jesus and guns and water and listening to this episode was pretty compelling to me, I'll tell you that. And, as we jump into this, I'm sure many of you are so curious to know what our segment is. I know that's what you look forward to. You are super anxious to know what fun thing we have come up with. And so today I have come up with a new segment called Bunker Buddies. The guys are trying not to burst into laughter as they hear this. But Bunker Buddies is going to be our segment, and we'll share more with you after the music. But I would really just love to hear from both of you. What are some of your first initial responses to this episode that Bonnie did?
Yeah, I think maybe a bit of advice to those listening. If you haven't already listened to Bonnie's interview with Carolyn Baker, you should probably hit the pause button on this episode. Listen to that, because we're in conversation about that episode right now. And, overall, she touched on a lot of things that are directly involved with sort of the times in a big sense, but also the times in very specific sense. Things like January 6th, what led up to it, the undermining of the freedoms in our society, in American society, that have been percolating for a while. And she had some thoughts on how we can navigate it all. It was a comprehensive conversation about these topics, about our times, what got us here and how to get through them, I think, might be a bit of a summary. And she said it really well. I think one of my biggest takeaways from it, as clear and honest and as sobering as she was, I felt a tone and substance of hope throughout all of it. So in a way, I feel like I'm better informed, actually about the horrors that are happening, and more hopeful about what's possible for us than I was before the interview. I mean, that sounds a little cheesy, but it is true for me. And so I really appreciated her ability to bring hope into her analysis of all of it.
Yeah, I was really struck by, like you're saying, Rajeev, the hope that she brought to it. But I really do think that term that she used. Christofascism is a really important term to start using because it's very explicit in terms of bringing accountability to the Christian heritage that we all have and all of the horrible things that it's done to bring about the many things that we're dealing with and reconciling with today. And I don't think that the institutional church is very good at all with keeping itself accountable and rectifying past atrocities. I don't know exactly how that would be done, but I don't even think that these institutions are having those conversations. So of course they're not going to know what to do. And I think that, being in America, Christianity is our heritage, whether we like it or not. Like that's just the white Europeans that came over and started this nation. It's why so many people today say it's a Christian nation. It's a Christian nation. Well, that's largely true. It was founded on these, Judeo-Christian values, Protestant, whatever. And I mean, we've not been accountable to the things that we've started. And instead of doing that, a lot of these institutions are just dying on the vine. Yeah, so I just think it's something to keep in the front of our minds and think about.
I think it's interesting that an institution, and by that I mean just Christianity at large, capital C, Rajeev, capital C, all right? The institution that is the institution to talk about confession, absolution, forgiveness, and then absolution is the very institution that struggles the most to confess. It is the institution that has failed at every turn to confront the atrocities, as you said, Jeff, and its leaders for continuing to perpetuate them. I mean, and we can think of all sorts of things, right, in terms of child abuse and financial scandals, or just churches in general that sit on millions and millions of dollars while hungry people live in their communities. But I think that for me, like the thing that I just kept coming back to was, especially when I realized that it would be the three of us having this conversation, is that it is mostly men's fault. I mean, in terms of if we were talking about the end of the world as we know it, which we are, we're here, we're sort of staring down the barrel. If you listen to our previous episode with Sela, who was phenomenal in our generations episode, we are kind of at a breaking point. And it is patriarchy cuddled up next to a few other things that have led us to this place. And as men, cis men, I think that in some ways it is appropriate for us to have this conversation today and to sort of talk about historically, how did we get here? Theologically, what are some of the issues? And I would love to round off the conversation, Rajeev, with your hope. We talked a few episodes ago about hope, and that, the vehicle towards hope is wonder and gratitude. So maybe I would love to hear that towards the end. But just in this meantime, I mean, I'd love for you all to pick up on some of that around where we are.
Yeah, I think the analysis, the comment around, men have been violently, we've used violence as a tool to keep our control over things historically. And, I hear you when you say, the church hasn't done the confessing, etc. And I mean, I think, frankly, I think the church is a convenient scapegoat. I think everything is a convenient scapegoat because the real ill is men are in charge of the church and have been. Men are in charge of all the stuff, and we have been. And so it's men that are the problem. Can you imagine what Christianity would look like if women were in charge from A to Z? And some of us men got to, be in support of an institution that was run by, visioned by women? It would be a completely different universe. And so I agree with you. The lack of confession, contrition, accountability is inherently a male supremacist problem, a patriarchal problem. And, we men have kind of run everything for too long. And it's gotten us where it's gotten us, and things need to change. So part of that maybe exploring as we continue this conversation, exploring what that stepping back can look like. That readily comes to mind is the common denominator, whether it's government, corporations, industry, religion. The common denominator is male supremacist domination.
I know that this is bad science because the correlations are not, 100%. But I'm even thinking of COVID and the countries that are ran by women that have not had the issues that we have had. I think of New Zealand specifically. Germany is another one where women are running the countries and they are not having the issues with COVID that we are. Again, someone might want to, check me, but really.
Well, I think that's a really great observation. I think Germany's having trouble similar to what we're having as far as vaccination rates and stuff. But the way Angela Merkel handled that leadership role, she's a scientist. And so she understands the systems. Is the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern? It's embarrassing to not know her name because she's really amazing. But yeah, the way they handle it, they were just like, that poor island nation, like if they got it, they'd be in big trouble. Yeah, they handled it incredibly well. But I think it's the leadership, these are people that approached it with a lot of thought, a lot of intellect, and a lot of compassion and administrative skill. Yeah, good science or not, that's a good point.
Yeah, I just kept hearing in Sila's voice, and I hear, in Carolyn's voice, a sense of urgency that is deep. There is a sense of urgency to have these conversations, to bring into the light the systems that really are destroying us, and it's sort of like, especially in light of Sila's episode, like we sort of were talking about, like, we must have skin in the game to dismantle these things. Yeah, what does it mean to not just talk about these things? This cannot be a 45-minute discussion in my brain. When this is not a hypothetical for the young people of the world, or quite frankly, for people of color in the world, because the reality is climate change especially hits them the hardest. COVID hits them the hardest. Like we know that at the end of the day, any of these things will hit the communities of color more than anybody. And so we have to be willing to move from a place of just thinking about these things to articulating them in a way that leads us to action. That's how I feel. Right? Like, so Jeff, I'm thinking about you and your family, right? You have 2 daughters. Like, how do you navigate these things in your own home? Like, how are you raising them up?
I don't know what to do here. I mean, that's a good question, Casey. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking about this whole thing that we're talking about, and I know that it's a trope, right? Like, as a father of 2 daughters, and how that phrase is used by men like me to establish authority over things that they have no place to establish authority on, right? Like the red flag Twitter thing. You go to someone's Twitter account, and if the first thing that it says is husband, father, it's like, block, because it's so emblematic of the problem that we're talking about. I mean, how we deal with it in our home is we try to establish, with them the importance of their voice. And that can only be, I think, can only be exampled by my partner, who is a female, to use that voice. And I think that a lot of the times when it comes to like men's voice in our culture and moving away from the patriarchy, we have a whole group of men who are, super hurt that they can't say anything anymore and they can't do this or they can't do that because and it's like, how much more strength does it take to leave space for someone else? How much more leadership is it to leave space for someone else to shine, to use their voice because it hasn't been used in the past? So we talk a lot like that with our girls about, your voice is powerful, it's strong, use it, and try to show them representation of other people that look like them that are doing exactly that. Like I can't tell you how many Balala books we have in their room, and how many, there's a series of books called Rebel Women, really trying to shape the history that they learned. Because I know that that's a big part of it for me, is when I was growing up, representation was huge, right? Like, and I know it sounds silly, but when I was a little kid, I was raised by media for the most part, by stories. So I had like Rocky and John McClane and, all these, Indiana Jones, Luke Skywalker, like all of these cultural stories that were pretty prevalent. Most people knew what they were, and people saw them, and trying to establish that same thing. And this is just a small slice, but trying to establish that same thing for my girls, to say, hey, look, there's other faces that can be the hero of the story. And then trying to figure out how to teach them when to step back, when your voice is not needed in a particular situation, because they are going to grow up to be white women. And we've seen over the past 5 years, especially, that white women can be very dangerous in our culture. So how do we then teach them that, yes, your voice is powerful, but there are other times where you need to leave space for other voices to speak up? And I think that's the thing that we struggle with right now. And maybe just developmentally, we don't need to worry about that right now, because they're developing that voice. And once they can have more nuance to their thought as they reach adolescent and young adulthood, then we can hopefully instill that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, all that being said, I don't know. We're trying.
Well, as someone who knows your kiddos, they have no problem speaking. And I love
No,
that.
they don't.
I literally love coming to your house, and I will sit there for an hour and they will tell me a play-by-play of their favorite movie or favorite show. And I just really appreciate that. And they have opinions about the characters and what their hopes for their development. And I just love that. So I think you're doing a great job, Jeff. But really, all credit goes to Kat. We know that. So.
It's true. It's true.
Rajeev, I'd love to hear from you on some of this. And I think, as it's no secret that both you and I are pastors in a community in the Sacramento area. And as I was hearing Jeff, there was something that came to mind that relates to some of this about stepping back, right? So many of you know, I have this nonprofit that we started 5 years ago called The Landing Spot, which is a support group for LGBT teens and their adult caregivers. And in my sort of trying to let go and let God, honey, I have been trying to bring young adults in, bring other voices in. We're trying to make decisions around the next few months, because Omicron is just having a heyday all over the place. And do we meet in person? Do we not meet in person? And how do these decisions get made? And so I actually called a meeting today, and I could feel myself wanting to just take the conversation, right? Wanting to just sort of insert my voice into these spaces. But the realization that I don't have all the solutions here, right? I mean, which is something I already know. But there's this sense in which, like, as we're talking today, like, I think it's an important skill for us to learn, where we have the ability to speak, and then we have the ability to say, I may not have the best answers, or I might know that this is not going to go well, but let's try it anyway. We do no good to anybody if we cannot walk alongside people and raise up stronger leaders who can show us the way, or who can see things from a place that we cannot.
I don't know. It is such a weird thing to believe wholeheartedly that as men, it's time to step aside and then accept positions that are front and center. That's something I wrestle with constantly. Part of that is just circumstance, part of that's timing, and undergirding all of it, I think, for both of us is calling. Because I don't think it matters what our job titles were. We would be pastors in whatever work we were doing. If it was clerks for the local government, we'd be at lunchtime, we'd be doing some pastoring with people, listening to folks, accompanying them, and not being afraid of the hard spaces. one of the challenges, and I think Carolyn Baker's conversation with Bonnie brings some of this in. One of the challenges we face in confronting Christofascism is the confronting takes authentic people to be their fullest selves in order for a confrontation to be effective at all. And so what does it mean for me to be my fullest authentic self? And does my fullest authentic self have to be something that displaces or casts a shadow on anybody else? No, I don't think it does. Now, I don't know fully how to do that yet, but it's part of the challenge that I have taken on to try to be an authentic, full version of myself while being a cheerleader, a supporter, a lifter up of others, and try not to inhibit the growth and development of the people I'm in relationship with. And I think that is a huge challenge. And I think in all the way around, for some of us, it's sort of being conscious about tamping some things down in the way we do things. And for others of us, it's about stepping into things that we're on the margins of and we need to be in the middle of.
I mean, this goes back to good discernment, right? It goes back to acknowledging where you exist in the world, gender, race, sexual orientation, like all of these intersections. What do they lead to? Do they invite you to step into spaces and to lead? Or are there enough people in the space that look and sound like you that you can take a step back to make room for somebody else? That's called good discernment, right?
It's interesting, you the way that you all are wording this, it takes me back to my Pentecostal days, those prayer closet moments, right? Where like, let God examine your heart. And I'm thinking, what a powerful tool for me today. Not that I believe that God will come in and examine my heart, but I learned a posture that I can now examine my own heart and examine my place in the world and really like put some intense thought and emotion and just reflection into all those things, Rajeev, that you're talking about, like, and Casey, that you're talking about, where my life intersects, how I express my authentic self, whether it's through the tools that I've been given as a straight white male to just whatever scenario I'm in, everyone needs to hear my voice, which is, obviously the wrong way because we've all encountered those kind of people, and where I can be my authentic self in other ways, in ways of support, in ways to uplift. And I think that, adopting a spiritual discipline, if that's what we want to call it, of really self-reflection and with those things in mind, not because usually it was, at least for me in a Pentecostal set, it was like, what is my purpose? So it always put me at the center of that. And then how can I take that same energy, that same skill that I was taught, spiritual skill that I was taught growing up, and redirect it into something that's a lot more akin to what we're talking about here.
I have a question, and I mean this sincerely. It's not a joke. But you said prayer closet?
Is that not a term that was used that's used outside?
I don't know if that's just a Pentecostal thing, but that sounds like at once fascinating and lovely and wonderful and scary as F.
Well, it can be, for sure.
What is it?
Casey, it's not a literal thing. I don't have like a prayer closet, like with,
Okay, no, I figured that.
Okay.
I figured that.
Well, actually, I do have a prayer closet, Rajeev, and it's just a bunch of pictures of you. And
Oh, God. No, okay, I gotta go.
Is that why you needed is that why you needed those tea candles for me, those tea lights? Jeff?
Exactly. Don't worry, Casey, you have your closet too. No, I'm just joking.
I don't live in closets anymore.
But okay, is that a term you haven't heard either, Casey?
No, I never heard that term.
It's just
but I meant I went to very inappropriate and dark places when I heard it. So.
Well, I guess to clarify for any Protestants that don't have a Pentecostal background, it's just like a metaphor for like you put yourself alone with God, and you lock
called those quiet times.
Right. We said quiet time, but prayer closet was the term that I grew up with. Maybe it was just my weird community, or I don't know. If you're out there, please validate my experience by telling me that you've heard that term before. But it's just a shutting away, right? Like a shutting away and being alone with God away from everyone else, which my professor in college told me that some of the worst atrocities in Christianity happen when one man went alone in a room with his Bible. And I tend to agree with that.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Prayer closet.
Does that help shed some light on it? I know it's weird. Like Pentecostalism, there's a lot of weird stuff I could share. That could be a whole episode if we want, the weird things of charismatic Christians. But
yeah, that would be cool. That would be really cool. No, it's just such an interesting term that, yeah, I don't know. It's and as somebody who's pretty claustrophobic, it's problematic from that front. So I'm glad to hear it's not a literal closet, Jeff.
No.
That you're making or have in the corner of your garage.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, that the spiritual practices and the language that we put around it can be fascinating and meaningful in different ways. So anyway, thanks for clarifying that.
There was a moment when they were talking about Christofascism, Carolyn and Bonnie, and there was this moment when they were talking about how do you deal with people, and I swear to you that it sounded a lot like this: we can hate the sin but love the sinner. It sounded like that. It really did. It was we can love our family members or our Trumper neighbors, but we do not have to accept their sort of political scary ideologies or their aggression, right? And I went there. I mean, it was almost like, boom, I could connect these two things. And this sort of fear of like, oh my God, have we become like the exact opposite and of the same people that we despise, right? I really am fascinated with this idea of like, how do we walk alongside people? You know, Carolyn gave us some great tips, like don't get pissed, which is always the hardest part for me. Like I'm immediately pissed. Be curious, which is great. You know, where did you get that information? And for many of the people I know and love who live in that world, a lot of what I get from them is, well, I thought it, therefore it's true. It's like almost like you think, therefore you are, or something. That was really compelling to me about like, how do we walk alongside people? And also, how do we help them get curious about their own information intake, where they're receiving this, and how they're making decisions for their lives?
Yeah, the template for engagement that Carolyn Baker offered in that interview was brilliant, thoughtful, and compassionate. I haven't re-listened again, but I have plans to re-listen and actually write out notes because it's super good.
Casey, I got the same vibes that you did. The hate the sinner, you know, or hate the sin and love the sinner. With that particular portion of the conversation. And I wonder too, you know, I think everyone needs to know their boundaries, what they can handle and what they can't handle. I think there's room for compassion with those that are close to us, family, whatever. But I also think there's room for anger. You know, when we're in a place of protest where we're talking about larger issues, part of it is we don't have containers in our society for those emotions. And therefore, I don't think we have containers in our relationships for them. My wife has been listening to a lot of Brene Brown's recent episodes of her podcast, and she got her latest book. I don't remember what it's called, but I'll put it in the show notes. It's something that we've actually been, you know, going back to what you were asking before, it's something we've been talking with our girls about, where she did a survey and like a vast majority of people can only recognize 5 emotions in themselves, even though there's like 87 different nuanced ways that we can feel. And if we can't even see that in ourselves, what kind of toll is that going to take on our relationships if we can't have a container for these nuanced emotions and you know, grace and understanding with others and ourselves when we express those emotions? Because I do think that it's really easy, and I know maybe this is just for me, but it's real easy just to, you know, hold that in and let those things come out in ways that end up being more damaging to those relationships. It's kind of a tangent, but I also think that it's appropriate when we're talking about kind of these big issues where we can take those emotions.
No, I don't think it's a tangent at all. And what comes up for me right away, Jeff, when you were talking about the inability to access those nuanced emotions, which there are many of, and they're probably not really even that nuanced, they're there. But this, again, I think is a byproduct of toxic male supremacy, where we're like, look, you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to fight, you're allowed to, like, we're just in denial about so much, and then that template, that inability just gets forced on everybody, and so we struggle with that. Thank God for Brene Brown. I mean, really, geez. Before we end our conversation, I'm kind of jumping here, but I just want to talk about the cover, because in the interview, Carolyn references the cover that she really likes to her book, and I'm looking at it right now, and just so it's in front of me, and it's so powerful. There's the Kindle version, which is sort of the, I don't know what you'd call it. It's the, I don't know, the watered down version that she's not a big fan of. And then there's the version that she chose in partnership with an artist that she's in relationship, has a cousin or something. But it's so bold and scary, and that's where Christianity is in so many instances. And those of us in Christianity, this is what we're confronting, as fellow Christians. Yeah, so look up her website, carolynbaker.net, and scroll down a click or two. It's a powerful image. And get her book.
I think that this is something that we sort of talked about at one point around January 6th. This idea that if you were a Bible believer, honey, if you love the Lord, and you showed up waving your Christian nationalism flag, and you look around and see all these swastikas and Confederate flags, you might ask yourself, oh, is this where I've ended up? I mean, again, about in terms of good discernment, there's a church in our area that has hired for security of their church the Proud Boys. And you have to ask yourself, if you are someone who loves Jesus, are you willing to attend a church that partners with white nationalists? I mean, I remember as an evangelical, and maybe this has went away, and actually that would make sense for a variety of reasons, but I just remember walking into this event hall with a picture of George W. Bush, like huge, like 8x10 of George W. Bush as you're walking into the sanctuary. But that's a whole nother thing. You as an evangelical, at least when I was a young person, would hear things like you are to sacrifice everything for the cause of Christ. You are to lay your life down. You are not of this world, right? Those are the kinds of messages that Christianity, your faith above all. And now I think we have the tide has turned, and the messaging is that we would choose our white supremacy and our white nationalism over our faith. Are they the same thing? I mean, and I would argue they are. I mean, they have become the same thing.
In my experience, they were never separate. They were never separate. Like every church that I grew up in, it was, I heard pastors say, if I go into a church and there's not an American flag on the stage next to the Christian flag, then I'm walking out. And every, 4th of July or whatever Sunday was closest to that, there was always this, red, white, and blue confetti going all over the place for, America and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, come on, like, it was never separate. Like, it was always there. And I think that when they use the rhetoric of, you die for your faith and you're also confronted with the American flag, then it conflates those two things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I also think it's important for us to frame, American Christianity is a very adolescent, pimply-faced Christianity. It isn't the large body, the ancestry and history of Christianity. It's a blip on the landscape of the scene. It is a dominant force in our experiences. The hope is that we can get out of this adolescence without destroying too much more.
I don't know though, Rajiv. I don't want to push back on that, but I just want to kind of get a little bit more, because from my perspective, it's just the next iteration of the same energy that did the Crusades, or whatever. Like, it's still the main. Like, there's definitely so many wonderful, beautiful paths of Christianity, but it feels like the visible portion of Christianity has always been some version of this. It's always been some adolescent.
No, I think that's what grabs the headlines for their times. But I think, the vast work of Christianity is the quiet, compassionate work that happens in alleyways and huts and overcrowded apartment buildings, farms. There's the quiet compassion of Christianity that I think far outweighs the horrible headlines of the Crusades, of sex scandals, and Trumpism. It's just that way. I mean, I would say, Islam is in a similar boat to that. What grabs the headlines is this horrible behavior. But Islam as a religion isn't a horrible religion. It's far better than harmful. Not to say we don't have blood on our hands. I'm not trying to make that claim. But keeping it in perspective, I think, is really important.
Well, and wrapping it back to this idea of hope that we sort of started with. The invitation from the episode was get involved, right? Get involved. Do what you can. I think that something that happens with all of us is that the world, because we get more news information than we've ever wanted at the tip of our fingers, we begin to believe that it's our responsibility to change the entire world by ourselves, or that the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And I think that what I heard and the invitation that I continue to hear is that we just continue to, wherever we are, wherever we find ourselves, whether it be in tight spaced apartment buildings or at the local coffee shop, what agency do you have to carry out this steady, progressive Christian message? How do you engage, and how do you step back? And can you find that sort of discernment within yourself?
Yeah, well said, Casey.
And what influences and power structures are forcing you back into that box? It's the way that you worded that, Casey. I just last night with the family, we watched that movie Encanto. Have you seen it?
I loved it. Yeah, it's
Not
so
yet.
good.
It's good.
Everything you're saying right now, like, to me, that was it. Like, this whole family full of powers that have been like, I mean, it obviously deals with the elders and how they, their place and the rules that they impose on others, and the roles that you feel you need to tie into. But, each of the family members of this house have these powers, and they all feel the pressure of those powers, mainly because of the matriarch of the family. And it's about, finding that understanding, and people learning to be who they are, and people learning to let go their powers and relax, and like all kinds of different spectrums of that. But it's just it's a really cool kind of version of what we're talking about, right? Like, we've all been given some sort of power or influence in this world, and learning how to use it in a way that legitimately helps the community, as opposed to conforms to what the community expects, and really finding our way in the midst of those two, those two opposing forces feels really appropriate to this conversation. So yeah, I'm glad I watched it last night in advance of this, not knowing where it would go.
Was it on Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that will do it for us this week. So let us know what you think. To add your voice to this particular conversation, comment on the show notes, Irenicast.com/195. In the show notes, you'll find relevant links and a complete list of all the ways to add your voice to this conversation. And if you haven't already, please consider joining our email list. Joining our email list is the best way to keep updated on all things Irenicast, including our next intersection session that will be taking place on Thursday, February 3rd through March 10th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find a link to subscribe in the show notes, again at Irenicast.com /195. All right. Well, on the other side of the music, we're going to play Bunker Buddies. Hey. So stick around. It'll be fun. All right, and we're back. And so today we will be enjoying our segment, Bunker Buddies. Guys, you're my bunker buddies for life. BBLs. You're my BBLs. And so if we were going to be in a bunker together, you're only allowed 3 items. And I would ask that you each be considerate of our BBL living situation. What things would you bring to our bunker?
So I have a couple questions, Casey. Just before I want to get the world set in my head. Okay, so
Sure.
Is this like in this scenario? Do we have unlimited power? Like, can we assume that the bunker itself has been given, flowing water and power?
Correct. That's
Okay.
right. Right. We've just went underground because the white nationalists have taken over.
Okay.
And they're all praying to Jesus, and so we're hiding out. In the very way that they were convinced they would have to hide out, we now finally have found our way to the bunker. We have power and water.
Gotcha.
And
so
is it,
unlimited power, potable water.
Right.
Okay.
and is it like a one big room, or are we like a house situation where we have a kitchen and a living space?
This is a lot. This is a lot. We have a communal kitchen, and it's not like a fancy kitchen. You get like little propane tank.
It should just be a hole in the ground, Casey, that keeps us safe from the white nationalists. We got potable water and unlimited energy. What else can we ask for?
That's exactly right.
Other than a prayer closet. I think we should have that. Should just come standard prayer closet.
It should. I mean, every bunker has a prayer closet.
Oh man.
All right, Casey. How do you want us to do this? You want us to go one by one, or
get 3? Do we get 3 things?
We get 3 things.
And the 3 things can have like magical properties, like be unlimited.
I feel like there's a limit to these things.
Okay. All right.
Casey, I think it would be helpful if you started us with your first item so that we can get an idea on what you're thinking and what way you're going, and then we can follow behind.
Sure. Because we will not have internet in this world, because internet is full of fake news and pornography, the white nationalists have ended internet access, which means we cannot stream things. So I am going to bring my entire collection of Bob's Burgers as something to keep it light when I'm stuck in the bunker with the boys.
So I love that show and I hate that show. This is because I'm like, that's my life. Those are my kids. Those smart aleck punk kids.
And look, when Tina touches the boy's fingers and then she goes into this alternate universe of that was me all of high school.
That's a good one. All right, I would bring a decent collection of board games.
Okay.
Keep the mind and the socialization going.
So since you're bringing a collection of things, board games, I'm going to bring my cooking essentials. So my cooking essentials pack. So I got my chef's knife, which got to have. Got my cast iron skillet. Got to have that. And then since we do have unlimited power and water, I will bring my sous vide so that we can, whatever food we have available, we can cook to perfect temperatures and sear it on the beautiful cast iron skillet. So that would be my quick cooking bundle that I've grabbed as I ran out of the house as, neo-Nazis were burning down my abode.
I'm going to bring, because again, this is not limitless, I'm going to bring my 12 favorite bottles of wine, a case of wine, so that every year that we are stuck in the bunker, at least up to 12 years, we can commemorate our safety in our bunker.
Okay. I've got this concept for a fish tank that has multiple chambers, and it's a self-sufficient fish tank. And in each of the chambers, there's a supply of fish at different stages of development. And these are fish that reproduce very quickly. So we will have a decent supply of lean protein, that we can put in the sous vide and enjoy fish protein in perpetuity.
Sounds good. Well, since we're going to be in a hole and going along with what Rajeev was talking about, I was thinking, bring as many seeds, so a pack of seeds for produce that we could grow with the appropriate, UV light that is undoubtedly connected to Rajeev's intricate fish machine, because they're going to need some sort of light as well. So we
gotta have the
repurpose
grow
that light.
lights.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we got food covered and wine. I mean, what?
Well, 1 bottle a year.
That's right. That's right.
Which
make it last.
I'm fine with. But, Casey, hopefully you won't have withdrawals.
Because we have all the essentials, we now need an aesthetic. And so I will bring my favorite poster of Justin Bieber, just so that we have something to look at for all of our time in the
I don't know how I feel about that, Casey.
I don't know how many guesses we need as to which is the favorite poster of Justin Bieber, but he's a nice boy. It'll be fine. I got one more thing, right? We kind of got food covered. It sounds like it's almost like we got the bases covered. So what's a nice thing to have? A decent sound system.
Yeah. Okay. So we can listen to Justin Bieber.
So we can, listen to music, and with that already comes equipped with a hard drive with like a bajillion songs of all the genres. So we will be entertained through music.
All right, Bunker Buddy Jeff.
All right. Well, I gotta bring my guitar. We have a bunch of time down there, and I just know how to play chords, and I'm gonna use that time to get much better at the guitar.
You can spend time in your prayer closet playing the guitar.
That's right. And then if later the hard drive fails, then we can do some live music, and I'll play the guitar and Casey will sing.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll just add a little drum kit to that thing. I always wanted to learn to play the drums.
There you go.
Well, I must admit this was not a very successful event, but we tried. Look, Bonnie and I always say we are the least fun among us. So there you go.
What are you talking about? It sounds like it sounds
fun.
great. I'm down with this, Bunker. Although I'm not so sure about the Justin Bieber thing, but it's fine.
Look, that's our running shtick, so you just have to deal with it.
I'm fine. Yeah. If I get to be in the bunker with you two, then it's well worth the price of admission.
Casey, you had us thinking about survival, man. We're trying to deal with the survival of the white supremacist Christo-fascists who are up on the surface of the earth wreaking havoc. So
hey,
I took the assignment seriously.
I appreciate that.
You understood the assignment.
That's right. I didn't want to throw that out there because I'm not cool enough, but thanks, Jeff.
That's okay. I'll be the uncool one for both of us.
Well, that will do it for us this week. We have Intersections coming up again, just as a reminder, Thursday, February 3rd through March 10th, 2022. If you enjoy Irenicast and you'd like to join the work we are doing, please consider donating to our PayPal link at irenicast.com/PayPal. We are committed to keeping the show free for listeners, but there are costs involved, and we would appreciate your financial support. That's irenicast.com/PayPal. Irenicast is also a nonprofit organization, so your donations are tax deductible. You can also support the show by simply making sure you follow the show wherever you listen to this podcast. And if the platform allows it, please leave us a rating and/or review. So for this week, I'm Casey.
This is Rajeev.
And I'm Jeff.
Thanks for joining the conversation.